Just as a recap, what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about what we were talking about before lunch. Lots and lots of action right here between POs, vendors, and inventory. Okay, we are doing lots and lots of action right here. Okay, well, what we did is we created a vendor, we tied it to a PO, and it got some items into our puzzle. What that actually did is it created what we call those tubes. Okay, and I'm just going to flip over really quick so I can show you that graphic again. We're creating individual spots for all these things. And guess what? We did a great job and we have tubes set up. So now the next time you go to do it, what's going to end up happening? So say we just said a generic item. So let's do a little analogy right here, okay? We're going to use this top tube as our analogy, okay? And we potentially get it from multiple different vendors, okay? But eventually we want it all just to come out as a single spot, okay? So we created this generic item and we tied it to one of our vendors, probably like an internal vendor type thing, okay? How do we get these things to force through that tube?
You have to do an invoice shopping cart.
Okay, so that's on this outside. Guess what? I'm only going to sell one of these things, okay? I could get it for 50 mil. This is coming in.
We have to have the set PO and set up our...
The special POs, okay? So we used what's called a live PO to establish one link, okay? One vendor, we created the tube or the item, which is virtually a can, okay? And then we could sell it out. Well, when we start getting, let's call this A, this is B, C, and D. All of a sudden we start getting something from D, but we want to force it through this tube. How do we do that? We haven't covered that yet, but basically that's where we're headed. Okay? Does that make sense how we're going to kind of start connecting this dot?
You mean how we know how much we owe all those even though we stuffed them into the same tube?
Okay, so this, let's call this product A, okay? This is product A, okay? But we bought it from vendors 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? So we initially created a connection. You have to create that initial connection, okay? Now all of a sudden we're buying it from vendor 4, but it's still product A. We now need to say, I owe vendor 4, but I still want to buy product A. So no problem, we're going to kind of head in that direction. What we did prior, the first one, was we created a setup PO, and Madeline's like, oh wow, a setup PO, that makes such a good idea. Like, we possibly didn't even have quantities, we were just creating the tube, basically. So now, once you actually start buying from different places, that's when it starts getting a little bit fun. I think it's fun, but it is definitely a little bit interesting, okay? You guys want to hear a little history on how this kind of started?
Sure.
Okay, there's a company called Trinity Fasteners, and they sell nuts and bolts and washers. And what happened was is they started probably years and years ago, like 2008. All we had is vendor-specific tracking, okay? And what they ended up doing is, say they have a screw called a 2-inch stitcher, okay? Basically, it's a special screw that kind of self-taps, okay? It kind of helps screw itself in. And so they're like, well, guess what? I have a 2-inch stitcher, and I call it this, but I have this company that calls it this, and this one, and this one, and this one. Like, they had all these different part numbers and names and stuff. And then they're like, and by the way, we also have to, like, when we sell our stuff, we have the 2-inch stitcher, but we sell it to companies, and they might want it called XYZ8 or some, like they had all of this huge matrix. Incoming, ours, outgoing, and there are all these different pieces and parts. And we're like, whoa, that sounds pretty complicated. So what we eventually did is they were running everything through vendor-specific inventory. But what happened was is in the warehouse, they had a little bucket. So one little a bin, and so the bin, this had the 2-inch stitchers. And guess what? They were buying it from vendor 1, 2, 3, and 4, but they were throwing it all into the same bin. But then when they would sell it out, because it was vendor-specific, it was like, you got to sell this many out from this vendor, and it started to be a pain. So that's what actually, that is the industry that actually created us to be like, you guys got to come up with some sort of generic kind of thing. And so that's kind of some of the history behind it. So what we did is we created a different PO type, because all of our other POs were literally locked as rigid as you could think. Vendor part, like it was just very rigid all the way across, okay? And then what we had to do is we're like, you know what, I have to control the payable. This is who I owe, but the products might come from multiple different places or a generic. And so we had to create that flexibility gap, and we called it a special PO because it was no longer a normal PO. That's where the term special kind of comes from. Okay. We are going to do a little demo, but I think before we do that, in order to kind of get us on the right page, we are going to go read a small piece of a help file. Jenny, I hope your voice is ready.
I am ready.
Okay, I'm just going to go into any PO, and if I don't have a PO existing, it's this easy. Create an OPO, just temporarily type something in. You don't even have to finish it. You just want to get to this point right here. Add, edit, purchase order page, okay? We don't have to finish this PO. It technically hasn't even hit the database yet. This help file has the PO types. And what we do is the PO types help us as a tool. We talked earlier about tools, head and paper and pencils and word processors and spreadsheets. Well, guess what we use POs for? Tools. This is an inventory tool. Are we manipulating things? Are we joining pieces? It's just an incoming tool, okay? The other thing that I thought would be kind of fun, and just as by way of a note, Shannon, if you could write this down.
Mm-hmm.
Today at lunch, they started a ticket for us. We had a bunch of people that were adding some food to the ticket, and then eventually they had to create that whole thing, but in the meantime, they had to service other people. I'd like to run through that type of a scenario a little bit later on, just while I'm thinking about it, okay? I want to show you how we could run through that scenario in Adilas, okay? So, we are currently on the help file for add, edit a PO. We're going to scroll down here a ways. Actually, Shannon, I know you're a great reader. I'm going to have you start from the top because it'll kind of explain it, and then we'll skip a little bit of it. I'm not going to make us read this entire thing, but it'll kind of get us into this realm.
Purchase orders, or POs, serve a number of different functions. 1, they allow inventory items to be entered into the system. 2, they automatically create the backside of inventory, which is a payable, money owed for the purchase of inventory. 3, they create and provide a control number, or a main PO number, that may be passed on to the vendor in order to get the order or purchase started. 4, a PO may also be used internally to update inventory counts or combine products to generate output of a different kind, internal build POs. There are also a number of custom PO types that require special permissions. More information is provided below.
Okay, go ahead and read one more paragraph at least.
Note, the word PO, or purchase order, or production order sometimes confuses people. Don't get too stuck on the actual words themselves. They are editable. The Adilas.biz platform uses the PO as a general inventory tool to track costs and quantities. If your corporation uses orders, price quotes, or requisitions, feel free to change to naming convention from within the corp-wide settings. Once again, the Adilas PO is just an inventory tool. The actual assigned name or alias is determined on a per-corp basis.
Awesome. I did see a spelling mistake in there, but that's minor. We can fix that if we needed to. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have you do is, Shannon, we're going to kind of start right here on the PO type. Go ahead and start right here at 4.
Okay, PO type. Choose an option from the list provided. Actual values are controlled from the corp-wide settings and the dynamic naming. The field may be one of the single most important fields on the PO. This is how the system determines if the PO is a payable, counts as inventory, or is used internally by the system to update quantities and parts. Currently, there are 6 different PO types.
Oh, 6, I thought there were only 5.
My bad. I can't remember.
So, basic live PO. This type is used to denote inventory from an outside vendor. These POs are vendor specific and will affect inventory counts and payables as soon as they are marked received. As a note, all basic requests, vendor specific orders or quotes, will end up needing a status of basic live once they are actually received.
Okay, so what that means is you can see that there's 2 different things here, okay? Basic live and a basic request. If I start something as a basic live, it just stays that way. But if I start something as a basic request, in order for it actually to go live, it has to be flipped eventually to that state status.
So it'd probably be better to go with the basic life.
Well, it depends on the situation, okay? So if I technically don't have the items, or I'm just kind of making an order or just kind of dreaming some stuff up, but I don't want it to affect inventory, I might want it in that request status, okay? Then once it's live, you have to flip it to live, because otherwise it doesn't know what to play as far as ordered versus live, as far as quantities, okay? Shannon, let's go ahead and go to basic request.
Okay, basic request PO. This PO type is used for ordering, requesting, or getting quotes from vendors. This PO type records all of the main PO info without taking it to the next step, receiving it. The PO request may easily be turned into a basic live PO by switching the PO type. When this happens, the request will hold all of its original info and becomes received, actual or live. At this point, it will function just as a basic live PO would. Inventory counts and payables. This PO type is vendor specific.
Okay, great. Does that make sense, kind of how that works? Okay, so the next little piece, this is where it starts differentiating. When we first started, actually all we ever had was just this guy. Then eventually we're like, oh man, what if somebody wants to order it, but it doesn't really want to be almost like a quote status, or a, hey, I might want to sort of get this. What's your pricing on this? Oh man. So we had to add this kind of quasi-quote or order status, okay?
I'll tell you where I use it all the time. If I get a lot of stuff from Amazon, I can actually go to Amazon, I can fill up my cart and it just sits there. And they will even, they'll not only remember it, but they can even, if there's a change in the price, they'll even change the price while it's just sitting there.
That's great. That's great. That's kind of like just sitting out in La La Land, but it's almost like a wish list. You can use your requests to do some of this stuff. Sometimes what they do actually in harvesting things is they'll actually use a request PO to get product. So say, for instance, you're anticipating that you're going to have a certain number of yield, okay? You put in, hey, this should yield this should yield this should yield this, but it's technically sitting there because it's going to be, you're going to be growing it and raising it and doing all kinds of stuff, and eventually you have to harvest it, and then you flip it to live, and then it runs. Because technically, while it's growing, it's not really what it is. So it gets a little bit funky that way, but just so you know, there are different ways you can play this way. Okay, Shannon, let's do special live PO.
Special live PO. This type is very similar to a basic live PO, except it allows for multi and mixed vendors. This PO type allows the main vendor to be set as the payable, who will get paid, and the line items may contain bulk, generic, or non-vendor specific items. All special request POs, non-vendor specific orders or quotes, will need to become a special live PO in order to show up for roll call once the request is received.
Okay, so this might sound a little bit like, whoa, what's going on there? It's basically saying this. Special live allows mixed vendors. If you do a special request, it's just quasi, okay, until you flip it to a special live. You can't go a special request to a basic live. It has to maintain, am I vendor specific rigid, or am I mixed vendor, either request status or live status? So that's why there's 4 different areas there. Okay?
So the special request goes with the special live.
Correct.
And the basic request goes with the basic live.
Correct. Yes, that's perfect. And each one of these, you'll notice each one of them says, hey, see corp-wide settings if you want to name it something different. If you want to call it order, requisition, rather than like basic live PO, you could say basic order, or you know, like whatever you want to call your little different pieces. We allow you to name that because we know it might be a little bit special. Shannon, let's start right here again, right about here in the middle of special live.
These PO types are used by companies that buy the same item from multiple vendors and don't want certain items to be tracked on a per vendor basis. The items become a bulk or general usage item and are usually maintained under a special internal vendor. In order to use the special PO settings, an additional permission is required.
Okay, that's just good to know. You do have to have a special permission for that. Okay, let's go to special request.
Okay, special request is the request side of the special live POs, very similar to a basic request, except it allows multi and mixed vendors. See description of live POs above, which we just read. Once received, all special request POs will need to be flipped over to the special live PO status in order to show up and become real or live.
Okay, so basically you can record values and vendors and map it to items and all this kind of stuff, but because it's in the request quantity, It never shows up for payables, and it never shows up for inventory until it gets that little magic flag that says live and received. Once you go live and received, okay, cool. I'm going to put you over here in payables, and I'm going to put you over here in real life inventory. Okay, so that it's basically the flip-flops. It's kind of some status changing type stuff. I realize this is really tough to do this right after lunch because we just barely got full bellies and we're sitting here reading and we're like, ugh. It's okay. So those are the first four, okay? Once again, it was basic live, basic requests, special live, and special request. There are two more types. We're almost through.
Update. This type is used as a special PO to help update part quantities and values. It requires the parts admin or admin PO permission to make it work. There's a special section under the main parts homepage or PO homepage that has an update inventory count section. These POs are generated from that section. These update POs are also how you figure out your shrinkage and loss on your inventory. This PO type is not vendor specific, able to mix and match, and very flexible. If used through the update inventory count section, these POs will help do special math calculations that deal with updating inventory counts.
Okay, we're going to stop there for a second. I'm going to actually open up a new window just so you can kind of see what it's talking about. This is a whole separate little piece of the puzzle. So I'm just going to open up a new window. We still have that other help file. And it says you could either go to your Parts and General Inventory homepage, and it looks for a thing right here, Update Inventory Counts, or from basically your PO page. Either place you can get to the same link, so Update Inventory Count, okay? Once you go to it, what it does is it prompts you. It's kind of a multi-step process, but it literally will walk you through updating your inventory count. So once they exist, we just passed the bookstore and they were doing a huge inventory. Like, you literally could do it inside of Adilas as soon as you want, whenever you want, and it just records it according to when you updated that particular thing. Do you want to come back to this, or do you want me to show you this right now, or just roll forward and finish that help file?
So when you're talking about updates, would this, if you had something in a request, but when you actually got it in, you didn't get everything, would you have to go to update?
Okay.
Or would you just change it in?
No, anything that's live and real life, you follow its normal process. Okay, so the bookstore we just passed, they were doing their annual or semi-annual physical inventory. They're counting, how many of this book do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They pull it up in their system and it shows only 8, or maybe it shows 15, but they only have 8. They look in the back, make sure that they don't have anything, and they're like, oh man, we lost 4 of them. Okay, that's an inventory update. Another way that this happens is if we get like a digital file, say somebody's like, hey, here's all my items, here's 10,000 items, I don't want to have to key them in by hand. Can you import this whole thing? Well, we don't have any idea what their quantities are. By the time we get it and they get it, we basically put it all in. We create 10,000 tubes for them, and we put them in at zeros. Then they go through the inventory, and then they go find stuff. How many of these do I have? So they just count them, and then they pull that up, and they go 8. And so what it does is it basically preloads that system. That's 2 different ways that you would use an update inventory count type thing. Okay. Basically, here's where you would go. There's 2 ways to get to it, parts homepage or the PO homepage, and you do have to have that special permission, kind of an admin level on either of those guys, and it'll let you roll through it. But it does the math for you. You don't have to be like, okay, it says 8, but I really have 5. You just put what you really have. You have 5.
Can you go through an example?
Absolutely.
While we're talking about it?
Watch this, okay? So we haven't even started in here. I'll select my location. This is the first step. I'll hit submit. It comes back and says, hey, I just created a new PO for you. It's number 23. Would you like to continue to step 2? This only happens the very, very first time you get in there because it didn't even have something to put it into. I'll say step 2. So currently it's right here. It now comes into this little section. It says, which one of these multiple vendors would you like to do an update? And let's go find one that actually has something. So Shannon, you did a bunch that had Montreal, okay? So let's update some shoes, alrighty? We'll click here, we'll say get quantities. So it automatically pulls it and says, hey, I've got 25 of these man's hikers and the Womans, awesome, 25 of those as well. So if you wanted to, you could physically update this right here. All you have to do, how many do I actually have for the men's hikers?
21.
Okay, 21, okay? And let's say I physically still have 25 of the women's. I just leave it, and I go like this, click. Okay, so basically you can see how it rolled that to 21 right now, on the fly, already. What happened is behind the scenes, and this is kind of behind the scenes like what's happening, is this PO number 23 right here. So if I actually click on that, let's see here, view current PO. Okay. You are trying to, basically it's saying, hey, you don't have the, I'm missing a permission, okay? I'll just go to the printable version of it. So what it did behind the scenes is it automatically knew that we went from 25 to 21. That's a difference of 4. Roll it in. Here's how much I physically lost according to the cost.
Does it go anyplace else? Is that cost you just lost go anyplace else?
Okay, what it does,
It'll show up in your cost of goods
it kind of shows up in your payables for a little bit. It's kind of, whoa, you started adjusting something. Something's down here, like even though it's a negative payable or positive, depending on which way it's going. And then eventually what you do is you write that off to an account which is called shrinkage or which is called whatever. And then you can actually virtually pay through the system, and it'll send it to the correct spot. So right now, all you did is you basically advanced the ball to the next stage. Okay, very similar to that little graphic we saw with the data flowing down the river. You just passed a checkpoint. Okay, it basically started to add itself into the special PO that is called an update PO. Okay, this is the update PO type. It's special. Okay. Anyway, it just kind of helps you do it. We just did the Montreal one right here. Watch this. I'm going to go back just a page or so. Right here. What if I wanted to switch vendors? Change vendors. Let's see here. We're now going to check on the...
Marmot probably has the most.
Marmot?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Boom. We go to Marmot. We're still on the exact same PO. I'm switching vendors right here. Okay, so it's multi-vendor.
Oh, okay, so that one is your updated one, so you could do multi-vendors on it.
Correct. And Shannon, you want me to change a couple of these?
Sure.
Watch this. We'll just say we actually only have 7 of these, and this one actually went up. We actually had 20 of these, not 15. Okay. Whatever's real, you could do it. Whatever's not, you just say update.
So you're changing. Before we could only change one item at a time.
Okay, this is special. This is
multiple.
special. This is updating inventory counts. So what the bookstore was doing, and they closed the whole shop down, you technically could take a laptop in there and be like, they're running or doing whatever, and you could be like, okay, we're just going to do this shelf right here, okay? And in the meantime, even if they sell it, you're still tracking as far as it's real-time tracking. And so you virtually say, I'm just doing this here. What have I got under this item? What have I got under this item? Count. Oh, good. Oh, we got
Because
updates.
the real time, even if they were selling, if the sale.
It still plays into the same,
Yeah.
it plays into the
So
same
you don't
mix.
shut your business down to do your inventory.
You don't. Okay, so basically right here you can see how we've modified some stuff, okay? On that actual PO itself, let me see here, view the current PO, and once again it's saying, hey, you don't have the permissions. So check this out, -4, +5, -8. It's flip-flopping those quantities for me. And so if I actually did, see this refresh pack right here? If I actually went here and I said refresh, just to kind of see if I could find that refresh pack, and I went to usage, watch what it actually is doing. Okay, originally it came in on PO number 21. I had 5 of them come in, okay? Then there's this special one, this NA system, which is your update PO, and guess what? I went up by 5 as well. Like it's tracking where these things are coming, where the things are going. That's a limited version of what that thing does. You can filter it in.
So after I went through my whole bookstore and did that, I'm sure there's a place that you're saying I could probably go and see my inventory and make an accounting for
Absolutely.
shoplifting that.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. And I would actually say that for right now, if we're kind of in the operations mode, just try to get your numbers and get them. We can show you how to do that accounting. No
That's
problem.
okay.
No
That's
problem.
just-
That's actually getting into like virtually either paying for the PO or forcing it as paid and then recording it in a different spot. You're actually making some manual entries at that point, but we can show you totally how to pull that whole thing
When
through.
you run, that PO process you've got built in runs pretty central for air. That's a central piece where you create a PO to do anything that ties with your inventory.
Okay.
And
On the incoming side and on kind of the adjusting side, if you will, or updating side, we use a tool called a PO. It has a name, it's tied to a vendor, which we can technically even tie it to a system vendor, which is like, hey, you can't touch this one. This one's kind of a special one. And then we basically say, I can now record quantities, costs, ins, outs, values, tied to items. Like, we use it as a tool. And so that's why
your
we...
original version when you started out with that PO to send trucks and you build out from it then?
That's a great question. It actually wasn't. The first thing was stock units, serialized units, where we had to individually stick stuff to a certain item, okay?
And then you went, okay.
And then what happened was is all of these, the dealership had 5 locations. And the biggest problem was is their big ticket items. Oh my goodness, I got to track that $12,000 bucks because that's in one item that's $12,000 or $20,000, whatever it was. Okay, that was their first major pain. So we started there, and then eventually they're like, you know what? Every location, all 5 of my locations, have a parts department, and they're currently running on paper tickets. Is there any way we can start tracking some of this, and maybe even taking some of the items? The reason they had a parts department was because eventually they might have to do a lube and oil or put a new wheel so we started having to attribute pieces out of the parts inventory into a stock unit and saying, okay, you now hold that. We're virtually moving pieces around. That's where it started.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's where it kind of started.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
And this may not even have anything to do with Adilas, this may be a business thing. When you actually get something from a vendor, don't you usually count it before you put it in? So you're assuming that when you recount it, that either it's been broken or somebody's taken it. Is that what you're assuming?
Correct. And so a broken thing, you can do it in multiple different ways. If I wanted to, I could easily do an invoice for a 0 price, and I took 5 of these out. Say I was putting stuff away, and it broke. I just broke 5 jars. Okay, how am I going to account for that? My inventory just went down. I gained $0 from it. I might still owe my vendor. Okay, so you have 2 different ways you can do it. You can do it through an update PO, which I'm showing you right here, which actually kind of creates this reverse side, like, hey, there's some money here. What are you going to do with this money that kind of got lost? Okay, or you basically say, I'm going to call that cost of goods sold, and I'm going to create an invoice to myself as a customer so I can start tracking if I'm internally invoicing myself, and I'm just going to say, 5 jars, they broke, okay? 0 price, send it. 0 internal payment, done. So all of a sudden, I just fully updated my inventory count. Nobody owes me money, but all of that money automatically gets mapped to cost of goods sold because it was on an invoice. That's the 2 different ways that you can kind of play that game, okay? But it happens. You have returns, you have trades, you have all this kind of stuff. So we have to kind of think through some of those processes.
So what do you do when you have returns? If somebody brings
Okay,
you something.
that's a great question. I think that we're going to get way off the PO subject if you want.
Yeah.
Why don't you remember that, Shannon? Can you write returns down? We will revisit that again, okay? Because you can see that once you start down a path, it kind of opens up all sorts of doors. It really does, which is great. It's great. But I just wanted to show you how easy it is to update an inventory. Often I will do this. Say I'll have somebody, and like I said, they'll send me a digital spreadsheet of 10,000 items. Okay, hey, we went through our stuff, and here's what we have, and here's our cost, and here's our prices that we want to sell them for. Here's even on some of our categories. And so instead of hand doing 10,000 items, we do bulk stuff. Maybe that costs them $200 to $300 to do it bulk. Okay, we do it behind the scenes in bulk, and it creates POs for all that kind of stuff. It creates all the tubes. Everything's in there, but it's loaded in with 0 quantities. Or maybe they gave us quantities, but since the time that we got it and when they physically start, it's altered. That's where a good update PO right here would work out. Excellent. Okay? Cool. What I'm going to do right here is I'm just going to kind of close out of this section. We're right back at the help file. I realized that was a little bit of a diversion, but that's called the update PO. It does require a special permission, and it's kind of an admin math tool behind the scenes. Okay? Shannon, let's turn it back to you for an internal build. And Cheryl, you're going to want to listen to this one because guess what? This is miniature manufacturing, okay? Once again, an inventory tool.
Internal build. This type of PO is used internally to take raw goods and combine them to create something new. Knitting, packages, groups, mini manufacturing, etc. For example, say you wanted to make a cake. The raw goods might be flour, sugar, eggs, butter, etc. The internal build PO would subtract the raw goods from inventory, negative quantities, and create a new product called cake or cookies, positive quantities. This PO type has its own permission and is very powerful. This same PO type is used by the system when using the internal recipe build process. The recipes are basically a preset group of ingredients, parts, items, and or outputs. These recipes are called build and hold recipes. The internal build PO may also be used when taking a certain part, painting it, heating it, cutting it, chopping it, combining it, or somehow changing it into some other part, any type of mini manufacturing. This PO type, internal build, is how you physically control your inventory counts. Similar to the update PO, this PO is not vendor specific and does require special permission to use this PO type.
Okay, so here's an example of an internal build. This is even basically, like, imagine you buy something in bulk, okay? If I buy this by the 8-pack, I get a killer deal, but I want to sell it by the singles, okay? So technically what you do is you'd have one item for the bulk, and then you'd have another item for your singles. And what you would do is, here's how the simple process would do it. Let's call it A is the bulk piece, the 8 one, and B is the multi-piece one. So you would go like this. Internal build, I'm going to do it to myself. It's going to end up being $0. Nothing's changing hands. I'm going to say -1 of this item, so -1 of A, which is the 8-pack. It comes in and brings in, say it brings in a cost of $10 or something like that, okay? But it's a negative, so it's like, oh, I'm negative $10. And then you basically say, okay, I'm going to take that $10 and I'm going to redistribute it to these. I'm going to produce 8 singles of the B. That's a teeny little flip-flop. But what it does is you just bought something, then you tweaked it. All you did is you took it apart. That's all you did. But technically, it's no longer product A. It's now product B that is in the individual pieces. So that's where an internal build, it tracks the whole thing through. So when your original vendor, if they ever call you and say, can I get a copy of the PO that you sent me for this and this and this? It actually has product A still on it. Hey, I want X number of these bulk packages. And then behind the scenes, it does another little PO just as a tool to flip-flop those quantities, and all of a sudden you have all of your singles that you can now sell out the door as quick as you want. Okay? That's how things work on the internal build process.